Elevator of despair. The city skyline stretched out before them, a mesmerizing sea of twinkling lights that seemed to go on forever. Sarah and David stood on the balcony of their new high-rise apartment, taking in the breathtaking view. It was a warm summer evening, and the promise of a fresh start hung in the air. Their new home was a luxurious haven in the heart of the city. The apartment was spacious and modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows that allowed the city's vibrant energy to flood in. The walls were painted a soothing shade of gray, and the hardwood floors gleamed under the soft, ambient lighting. It was everything they had dreamed of. As Sarah gazed out at the cityscape, a sense of excitement and anticipation filled her. She and David had moved here to escape the monotony of their old lives, and to chase their dreams in the city that never slept. This apartment represented a new beginning for them, a place where they could build a life together. David, standing beside her, wrapped his arms around her waist and pulled her close. "Can you believe this is ours?" he whispered into her ear, his voice filled with wonder. Sarah turned to him, her eyes sparkling with happiness. "I still can't believe it," she replied, leaning in to kiss him. "It's perfect." Little did they know, as they embraced on their new balcony, that their dream home held secrets far darker than they could ever imagine. The high-rise building had a history, one that whispered of shadows in the night and mysterious disappearances. But for now, as the city's lights continued to dance around them, Sarah and David were blissfully unaware of the horrors that awaited them in their new home. The first few days in their new high-rise apartment passed by in a whirlwind of unpacking, exploring, and reveling in the excitement of their new life. Sarah and David couldn't have been happier. But soon, an unsettling feeling began to creep into their newfound happiness. It all started with their neighbors. One evening, as Sarah was returning from a trip to the building's fitness center, she encountered Mrs. Abernathy, an elderly woman who lived down the hall. Mrs. Abernathy was known for her eccentricities, and her appearance was always slightly disheveled. Her eyes, however, were sharp and piercing, and they locked onto Sarah's with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. "You're new here, aren't you, dear?" Mrs. Abernathy rasped, her voice oddly high-pitched. Sarah nodded, offering a polite smile. "Yes, my husband and I just moved in a few days ago. We're still getting settled." Mrs. Abernathy's lips curled into a peculiar smile. "Ah, newcomers. You should be careful, my dear. This building has a history, you know. A dark one." Sarah's smile wavered, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. "History? What do you mean?" The elderly woman leaned in closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Strange things happen here, especially in the elevator. You'll see." Before Sarah could respond, Mrs. Abernathy shuffled away, leaving her standing there, bewildered. She dismissed the encounter as the ramblings of a lonely old woman, but the words "strange things" and "elevator" lingered in her mind. Over the next few days, Sarah noticed other peculiarities. Neighbors would exchange hushed conversations in the hallways, their eyes filled with fear. The building's maintenance staff seemed unusually secretive and reluctant to engage in conversation. David, on the other hand, brushed off these odd occurrences, attributing them to the quirks of city living. He remained focused on his work, spending long hours in their new apartment. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah's unease grew. Every time she entered the building's sleek, glass-walled elevator, she couldn't help but feel as though she was being watched. Whispers, too faint to decipher, seemed to echo in the confined space, and the elevator would occasionally stop abruptly on empty floors. Sarah tried to convince herself that it was all in her head, but the unsettling welcome she received from her neighbors and the strange occurrences in the building left her with a growing sense of dread. As the days passed, Sarah's unease about the high-rise building grew more pronounced, centering on one particular source of anxiety, the elevator. What had once seemed like a convenient amenity had now become a source of dread. Each time Sarah entered the elevator, a shiver ran down her spine. The bright, mirrored interior that had initially felt so modern now seemed like a portal to an unsettling dimension. The elevator's walls occasionally felt icy cold, even on the warmest of days. The strangest occurrences, however, happened during the rides. At random intervals, the elevator would stop abruptly on floors where no one had pressed the button. It would sit there, motionless, the doors refusing to open. Sarah would frantically press the buttons to her desired floor, but the elevator remained unresponsive. In those moments, she felt trapped and vulnerable, the silence broken only by the distant hum of the building's machinery. But it wasn't just the unexplained stops that unnerved her. Whispers, barely audible, would fill the confined space. She couldn't make out the words, but they sounded like murmurs of despair and torment. Sarah's heart would race, and she would clutch her chest, trying to ignore the growing sense of unease. One evening, as Sarah entered the elevator on the 14th floor, she pressed the button for the lobby. The doors closed, and the descent began. But this time, something was different. The elevator's interior lights flickered and dimmed, casting eerie shadows that danced on the mirrored walls. Sarah's reflection appeared distorted, her features contorted in terror. She pressed her hands against the mirrored surface, trying to steady herself. That's when she saw it, a fleeting shadow in the corner of the elevator, a silhouette that shouldn't have been there. It moved with a fluid, unnatural grace. With a gasp, Sarah backed away, her heart pounding in her chest. The elevator continued its descent, the lights flickering back to their normal brightness. When the doors finally opened on the lobby, she stepped out, trembling. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong with the building's elevator. She had to find out what was happening, for her own sanity and safety, and for David's too. Sarah's growing unease about the high-rise building and its eerie elevator led her to take matters into her own hands. She began researching the building's history, hoping to uncover any clues about the strange occurrences that had been plaguing her. One day, while searching the internet for information about the building, Sarah stumbled upon a thread in a local history forum. The thread was titled "The Secrets of the High Rise" and was filled with stories and urban legends about the very building she now called home. As she read through the posts, a chilling realization washed over her. She wasn't the only one who had experienced strange and unsettling phenomena within the building's walls. One particular post caught her attention. It was written by a former resident who claimed to have discovered a hidden chamber in the building's basement. The resident described the chamber as a small, forgotten room filled with dusty old documents and faded photographs. These relics told a haunting story of the building's past. With newfound determination, Sarah decided to investigate further. She made her way to the basement, which was a dimly lit and seldom visited area. She had to navigate through a maze of storage rooms and utility spaces before she stumbled upon a narrow, cobweb-covered door that seemed to lead to the hidden chamber described in the forum post. Using all her strength, Sarah pushed the door open, revealing a small, dusty room. The air was stale, and the floor was littered with old papers and forgotten debris. On a table in the center of the room lay a collection of aged documents, including newspaper clippings, letters, and photographs. As she began to sift through the materials, a chilling story emerged. The building had a dark and mysterious history dating back many decades. There were accounts of unexplained disappearances, suicides, and bizarre accidents that had occurred within its walls. The photographs showed grim-faced residents and maintenance workers, their eyes haunted by secrets. One particular set of photographs sent shivers down Sarah's spine. They depicted a group of individuals gathered around the building's elevator, their faces obscured by shadows. In each photo, one person was missing, replaced by an empty space. Sarah couldn't ignore the eerie implication. The elevator had played a sinister role in the building's history. As she continued her investigation, she discovered a name that recurred in the documents: Dr. Alexander Blackwood, a former resident and building maintenance worker who seemed to have connections to the mysterious occurrences. Driven by a growing sense of dread, Sarah realized that uncovering the truth about Dr. Blackwood and the hidden chamber might be the key to unraveling the building's dark secrets and putting an end to the haunting occurrences that had plagued her and David. As Sarah delved deeper into the dark history of the high-rise building, her once close relationship with David began to strain. While she became consumed with unraveling the mysteries of the building and its malevolent elevator, David became increasingly preoccupied with something else entirely. David had always been a hard-working and dedicated man, but his behavior began to change in unsettling ways. He would spend hours alone in their apartment, obsessively studying the building's elevator. He had taken to recording its movements, meticulously documenting every strange occurrence and unexplained stop. Sarah watched as the man she loved transformed before her eyes. He became distant, his eyes haunted by an obsession that she couldn't comprehend. He hardly slept, and when he did, it was plagued by nightmares that left him drenched in sweat and gasping for air. One evening, Sarah found David in the living room, surrounded by notebooks filled with scribbled notes and diagrams of the elevator. His face was pale, his hands trembling. "David, please," she pleaded, tears welling up in her eyes. "You have to stop this. It's tearing us apart." But David was unresponsive, lost in the depths of his obsession. He muttered to himself, his words unintelligible, as if he were trying to decipher some cryptic code. Desperate to save her husband from this torment, Sarah decided to confide in someone who might be able to help, the mysterious Dr. Montgomery. She had seen his name mentioned in the documents she had discovered in the hidden chamber, and she believed he might hold the key to understanding the malevolent force at play in the building. One evening, when David was engrossed in his research, Sarah left a note explaining her intentions and set out to find Dr. Montgomery. She knew that confronting the malevolent entity that lurked in the high-rise building would be their only chance at saving their relationship and their sanity. Sarah's quest to seek help for her troubled husband led her to the doorstep of Dr. Montgomery, a renowned paranormal expert whose name had appeared repeatedly in the documents she had uncovered in the hidden chamber. She had found an address for his office in the same building, located on the 17th floor, and hoped that he could shed light on the malevolent force that seemed to be taking hold of their lives. The hallway outside Dr. Montgomery's office was dimly lit, and the air seemed heavy with an unspoken tension. The walls were adorned with eerie paintings and artifacts from various cultures, hinting at the depth of his expertise in the paranormal. Sarah's knuckles rapped on the door, and a voice from within invited her to enter. The office itself was a dimly lit chamber filled with shelves stacked with old books and mystical artifacts. Dr. Montgomery, a middle-aged man with a salt and pepper beard and a pair of piercing, intelligent eyes, sat behind a desk cluttered with research materials. Sarah explained her situation, recounting the strange occurrences in the building and David's growing obsession with the malevolent elevator. Dr. Montgomery listened intently, his expression growing increasingly serious. "You're not the first to experience these phenomena," he said gravely, his voice low and measured. "This building has a dark history, one that's intertwined with the supernatural. It's been a magnet for otherworldly energies for decades." Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine, but she was determined to seek answers. "What can we do? How can we stop it?" Dr. Montgomery leaned forward, his eyes locked onto hers. "We need to confront the malevolent force that dwells in that elevator. But it won't be easy. It feeds on fear and thrives on chaos." Together, they hatched a plan. Dr. Montgomery would bring his extensive knowledge of the paranormal, and Sarah would bring her love for David and an unshakable determination to free him from the grip of the malevolent entity. As they prepared for their confrontation with the supernatural, Sarah couldn't help but wonder if they were walking into a nightmare from which there might be no escape. But she knew that they had no other choice. They had to uncover the truth behind the building's dark history and face the malevolent force head-on if they wanted any chance of saving their lives and their love. As Sarah and Dr. Montgomery delved deeper into their investigation of the malevolent force that plagued the high-rise building, the line between reality and the supernatural grew increasingly blurred. The building itself seemed to react to their efforts, as if it were resisting their attempts to uncover its secrets. They spent countless hours poring over old documents, conducting interviews with former residents, and analyzing the history of the building. What they discovered was a series of horrifying incidents that defied explanation. Residents had gone missing, their fate remaining unknown, and others had succumbed to madness, driven to the brink by the unexplainable phenomena within the building. During their investigation, Sarah and Dr. Montgomery were plagued by a series of disturbing events. They heard disembodied voices whispering in the shadows, and the elevator became more erratic and malevolent, as if it were aware of their intentions. On several occasions, they found themselves trapped inside the elevator, its walls seemingly closing in on them, the whispers growing louder and more menacing. David's condition continued to deteriorate. He had become obsessed not only with the elevator, but also with the mysterious Dr. Blackwood, whose name appeared repeatedly in their research. David's once rational mind had been consumed by a frantic need to uncover the truth, and he grew increasingly paranoid, convinced that Dr. Blackwood held the key to their salvation. One night, as they gathered their research materials in their dimly lit apartment, David suddenly snapped. He began ranting about the malevolent force, accusing Sarah and Dr. Montgomery of conspiring against him. His eyes were wild with fear and paranoia, and he lashed out in a fit of rage. Sarah watched in horror as her beloved husband, the man she had once known so well, spiraled into madness before her eyes. It was a chilling reminder of the malevolent entity's power and the darkness that had taken root in the building. As David's screams echoed through the apartment, Sarah and Dr. Montgomery knew that their confrontation with the malevolent force was drawing closer. But they also knew that the battle ahead would be one of the most harrowing and treacherous challenges they had ever faced. The building's secrets were beginning to unravel, and they were descending deeper into a nightmare from which there might be no escape. The high-rise building had become a nightmarish labyrinth of terror, and Sarah and Dr. Montgomery knew that their final confrontation with the malevolent force that dwelled within it was inevitable. They had gathered a wealth of knowledge about the building's dark history and the enigmatic Dr. Blackwood, but they still lacked a clear understanding of the entity's true nature. In preparation for the final battle, they devised a plan to confront the malevolent force head-on. They knew that the entity thrived on fear and chaos, and they had to find a way to weaken its hold on the building. Armed with a combination of ancient rituals and modern technology, they set out to break the malevolent entity's grip on the high-rise. Their journey through the building was fraught with peril. The elevator, now fully under the entity's control, became a nightmarish death trap, stopping on floors that seemed to exist only in the realm of the supernatural. They encountered apparitions of past residents, their faces contorted in agony, and heard the anguished cries of those who had fallen victim to the malevolent force. As they descended deeper into the building's bowels, the walls seemed to close in around them, and the air grew heavy with a palpable malevolence. The whispers that had haunted them for so long grew into a deafening cacophony, threatening to drive them to madness. At the heart of the building, they discovered a hidden chamber, much like the one Sarah had found earlier. It was here that they hoped to perform the final ritual that would weaken the entity's power and banish it from the high-rise forever. As they began the ritual, the room was filled with an otherworldly presence, and the building itself seemed to shudder in response. The walls bled shadows, and the air grew icy cold. The malevolent entity fought back with all its might, unleashing a torrent of horrors upon them. But Sarah and Dr. Montgomery were determined. They drew upon their collective strength and resolve, and as they chanted the ancient incantations, a blinding light erupted from the room, piercing through the darkness. The malevolent entity held in agony as it was pushed back, its power waning. The building trembled one final time, and then, with an ear-splitting shriek, the malevolent force was banished. The high-rise was free from its grip, and the walls that had once seemed so menacing now stood silent. Exhausted but victorious, Sarah and Dr. Montgomery emerged from the chamber, knowing that they had faced the darkest of horrors and emerged triumphant. But as they looked around at the building that had been their prison for so long, they knew that they could never truly escape its haunted past. The high-rise bore the scars of the malevolent entity's reign, and it would forever be a place of whispered legends and chilling stories. Sarah and David, reunited but forever changed, left the building behind, knowing that they had confronted the forces of darkness and lived to tell the tale. With the malevolent force banished and the high-rise building free from its grip, Sarah and David emerged from the nightmarish ordeal forever changed. The building that had once held the promise of a new beginning now bore the scars of their harrowing journey, and the truth about its dark history had been unveiled. As Sarah and David returned to their apartment, they felt a sense of both relief and emptiness. Their love had been tested in the crucible of fear and madness, and they had emerged stronger for it. However, they couldn't escape the haunting memories of the malevolent entity and the horrors they had witnessed. Dr. Montgomery, the paranormal expert who had helped them confront the malevolent force, had played a pivotal role in their survival. He had not only shared his knowledge, but had also shown them the strength of resolve and the power of belief in the face of unimaginable terror. Although he had guided them to victory, he had paid a heavy price and had vanished into the shadows, leaving behind only a cryptic message: some secrets are best left buried. The building itself, once a symbol of hope and ambition, had become a place of legend and infamy. Sarah and David couldn't ignore the fact that they had only scratched the surface of its dark history. The mysteries of Dr. Blackwood, the malevolent entity's origin, and the true extent of the building's supernatural influence still lingered, casting a long shadow over their lives. As they gazed out of their apartment window at the sprawling city below, they knew they could never truly escape the past. The high-rise building had become a haunted monument to their ordeal, a place where the boundaries between the living and the dead blurred, and where the malevolent entity's presence still lingered in the hidden corners. With a heavy heart, Sarah realized that their journey was far from over. The unveiling of the malevolent force had left them with more questions than answers, and the shadows that had once loomed in the background were now cast into stark relief. They knew that some secrets could never be fully uncovered, and that the high-rise building would forever remain a place where the line between reality and the supernatural was drawn in blood and darkness. Sarah and David had endured a nightmarish journey through the malevolent force that had plagued their high-rise building. As they stood in their apartment, looking out over the city, they knew that their battle was far from over. The horrors they had faced had left them scarred, and the building itself remained a chilling monument to their ordeal. In the days that followed their final confrontation with the malevolent entity, they made the difficult decision to leave the high-rise building behind. The memories of the whispers, the shadows, and the unexplainable horrors that had haunted them would forever be etched in their minds, but they couldn't bear to stay in a place so tainted by darkness. Their decision to leave was met with mixed emotions. They had survived the malevolent force, and their love had endured the trials that had been thrown their way. But the building itself had become a living nightmare, a place of legend and infamy where the line between the living and the dead was forever blurred. As they packed their belongings, Sarah and David couldn't help but wonder about the mysteries that still lingered. Dr. Blackwood's name had been a constant presence in their research, and the true nature of the malevolent entity's origin remained elusive. They knew that some secrets were best left buried, but the questions haunted them nonetheless. As they left the building for the last time, they cast one final glance back at the high-rise, their former home, and the place where their love had been tested to its limits. They knew that the scars of their ordeal would stay with them, but they were determined to move forward, to leave the darkness behind, and to build a new life together. The city stretched out before them, a canvas of endless possibilities. As they walked away from the high-rise building, hand in hand, they knew that they had escaped the abyss of their nightmarish ordeal. Their love had endured, and they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that they had conquered the malevolent force that had once threatened to tear them apart.